On our broadcast tonight, one by one, the miners trapped for 2 months are brought to freedom in a rescue mission the whole world is watching, while on the surface, the tears and cheers and joyful reunions. Also tonight, it was a wild one, the final debate between two rivals for governor, and it gets personal. And Education Nation, superstar, villain, she's been called both. But tonight she is out as the woman in charge of one of the nation's most troubled school systems. So now what? Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Last night was one of those nights, and today was one of those days when you could almost feel people watching live television coverage, in this case of a rescue effort of 33 men who have been trapped 2,000 feet below the surface of the earth for more than 2 months. This afternoon, the 24th man to come out was just as emotional to watch as the first to come out late last night. And just the sight of his little boy, by the way, drove some people over the edge. The president of Chile told the men this morning, just rest, recover. You've got your whole life ahead of you, and you were never alone. It's been a great reminder of what humans can do when they put their minds to it, and it's still going on tonight. Our coverage begins tonight with our own Carrie Sanders, who's been describing each great moment as it happened. Carrie, good evening.
Well, good evening, Brian. It's over. All 33 of the miners are now safely to the surface. It took 22 hours, 34 minutes, 56 seconds to bring them all up. The last to come up, Luis Urzua. He is one of the leaders and, like the captain of the ship, the last to come up. This has been a historic triumph.
Again and again. And again, prayers answered. It all began shortly after midnight local time as a rescue engineer strapped into the 26-inch wide escape capsule named Phoenix 2 and then began the still unproven manned trip below, 2,040 feet down a shaft through some of the hardest rock on Earth. 17 minutes, 22 seconds later, first contact. It worked on the way down, and soon, as 1 billion viewers around the world watched the image like a transmission from the moon, 31-year-old Florencio Avalos would prove with this first trip to the surface, the capsule worked both ways. At 11 minutes after midnight, as Florencio was the first to end this 70-day crisis, his son, 7-year-old Byron, touched everyone's hearts. A father and son finally reunited. Up next, 39-year-old Mario Sepulveda. When he cleared the escape pod, his celebration thrilled a nation. He surprised Chile's president and rescuers with souvenirs, pieces of rock from the cave-in. His energy belying a man trapped in a mine for more than 2 months. They now call him Super Mario. He hugged and kissed just about everyone, and then said of his ordeal, "I met God. I met the devil. God won." With each emotional rescue, the tempo has picked up. The Minister of Mines tweeted, round trips now take less than an hour. No one has needed a stretcher. In fact, all the miners look remarkably fit. Still, paramedics use one into the triage area, where the survivor's first request is met, a hot shower. The one miner whose love life played out while he was down came up late this afternoon. Yoni Barrios was met not by his wife today, but by his mistress. The two women discovered each other when this crisis began. No matter how long it takes, Chile's president and the First Lady are personally welcoming each miner to the surface. 23-year-old Carlos Mamani, the only miner not from Chile, was visited today by his president, Bolivia's leader, Evo Morales. He offered Mamani land and a job if he came home. Mamani said he'd rather stay with his brothers in his new country, Chile.
With all 33 miners now safely at the surface, the president of Chile says this mine will now be closed permanently. Brian?
Kerry Sanders tonight with thanks for your nonstop coverage from the scene as we now head into this second night of it. And we keep coming back to the families of these miners, from those at the top of the list to the bottom, from the first to emerge to the last. What must that be like? You've seen the above ground celebrations with each new emergence. It means for them, at least, the ordeal is over. Tonight from the scene, our own Natalie Morales has their story.
A hug probably never felt so good.
Como ver un nacimiento.
It was so beautiful, like a rebirth, says Lily Ramirez. She never stopped worrying about her father, Mario Gomez, the 9th miner brought to the surface. Her mother, Lilianette, greeted him with a long-awaited kiss. The family reunions are sweet but short as the rescued miners are taken for medical evaluation. The women who have kept vigil here joined in the celebration with their neighbors in this now close-knit community. They arrived here as strangers more than 2 months ago, but will leave as something closer to family.
Una sola familia, Esperanza.
We are one family here at Camp Esperanza. I've never seen anything like it, says Luisa. When it was her family's turn to see her brother Dario Segovia come out of the capsule, pure joy.
This has become a home away from home for many of the miners' families, and many of the women have made their own pact, saying they're not leaving here until every last one of the 33 miners is out.
For the Segovia family, waiting for their 3 miners, all cousins, to be rescued, this ordeal has meant a new beginning.
La familia antes no era tan unida.
Before, the family was scattered. Now we are back to being a family, united, says Segovia's niece. 10 weeks of anguish for these families have been transformed to tears of joy and a chance to say, I love you. Natalie Morales, NBC News, Copiapó, Chile.
And about all the millions worldwide who have watched this drama, hoping this ends as well as it has gone so far. We'll have a report on that a bit later on in this broadcast. Back in this country, all 50 state attorneys general announced today they have launched a big joint investigation into the foreclosure fiasco that has led several of the nation's biggest banks to stop foreclosure evictions and sales, and has put a big cloud over the real estate market already hurting. The group did not call for a nationwide foreclosure freeze, but Ohio's attorney general said the probe is just getting started and they will go wherever it takes them. Now we turn to politics. Sharon Angle, the conservative Republican who's challenging the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid for his seat in the Senate from Nevada, raised an awe-inspiring $14 million in the third quarter of this year, shattering the record for a Republican in that state and bringing her almost even with Reid in the money race, at least. The polls are showing a close race between Reid and Angle, who had virtually no campaign money after the GOP primary. Bill Clinton campaigned for Reid in Las Vegas just last night. And Michelle Obama is out on the campaign trail tonight for the first time since '08. Attending a fundraiser for Democratic Senator Russ Feingold in Milwaukee, who's facing a big challenge from Republican business owner Ron Johnson. The Democrats are candidly taking advantage of her approval rating, 20 points higher than her husband's in several polls. Today, the First Lady acknowledged that many people in the Midwest are hurting economically and urged voters to have patience.
Many of us came into this expecting to see all the change we talked about happen all at once, right away, the minute Barack walked into the Oval Office door. But the truth is, it is going to take a longer time to dig ourselves out of this hole than any of us would like.
The First Lady will spend a rare night at the old Obama family home in Chicago tonight after attending fundraisers for local Democratic candidates, including the one in a tight race for her husband's old Senate seat. It is just one state, after all, but it has the most people, 12% of the population of the United States. So what happens in California matters a lot and is closely watched, including the current race for governor. Tom Brokaw moderated last night's third and final debate between Jerry Brown and Meg Whitman. It went from substance to sparring to policy to personal, all in one night. Our own Lee Cowan is in San Francisco for us tonight. Lee, good evening.
Brian, it's hard really to imagine a job more difficult than this one. You're in charge of a state whose economy is one of the largest in the world that is essentially bankrupt. You're facing an unemployment rate that is the third highest in the nation. And yet, this race is going neck to neck. And last night, voters got a chance to see just who's who. It was their final scheduled matchup, and the exchanges were as meaty as they were mean.
My business is creating jobs. Your business is politics.
That was the line all night. Meg Whitman, the former eBay CEO with no political experience, is up against Jerry Brown, who's been a creature of Sacramento for years. It's insider versus outsider, sparring over ways to resurrect the state's limping economy. Whitman, for example, wants to cut capital gains. Brown disagrees.
And Ms. Whitman, I'd like to ask you, how much money will you save if this tax breaks were in effect this year or last year?
I'm an investor, and investors will benefit from this, but so will job creators.
Immigration reform was center stage too, with Whitman having to defend employing and then firing an undocumented housekeeper, a move Brown called insensitive.
There. After working for 9 years, she didn't even get her a lawyer. At least I could tell you that could be done.
But as moderator Tom Brokaw put it, Brown has his own notorious issues to deal with. That was a Brown supporter, caught on tape calling Whitman what Brokaw described as the equivalent of a racial slur.
I don't agree with that comparison, number one. Number two, this is a 5-week-old private conversation picked up on a cell phone.
Whitman called it unbefitting. And Brown did apologize, but pointed out that one of Whitman's own supporters once used the very same word to describe Congress.
You know better than that, Jerry. That's a completely different thing.
In the end, for all those undecided California voters, some say it may not have changed a thing.
What they may have taken away from this debate is there are two flawed candidates. There are two candidates who didn't, even when pressed, get into specifics.
Now, Whitman dropped more than $140 million of her own money in this race, Brian. That's more than any other candidate. Both of them, though, still have a lot more money left to go, so they can duke this out all the way until Election Day. And we should point out for those viewers who are wondering why Tom Brokaw was on crutches last night, he broke his ankle over the weekend, but he says he's going to be just fine. Brian, back to you.
See the other guy. All right, Lee Cowan in the shadow of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Lee, thanks. When Nightly News continues in just a moment, Washington's controversial public schools chancellor leaving her post tonight, why she's departing and what it means. And later, the world watches the miners emerge, giving everybody a badly needed piece of good news these days. Michelle Rhee is regarded as a hero by her fans, but those who think she's the enemy pumped a lot of money into the mayoral election in Washington to try to defeat her by defeating her boss, the mayor, and they did. Until today, Michelle Rhee ran the troubled school system in Washington, D.C., a system hardly ever mentioned without the word troubled in front of it. She was a tough and controversial chancellor, a reformer, and now people are watching and wondering what next for her. As part of our Education Nation, NBC's Rahima Ellis covers education for us.
After nearly 4 years of pushing for change, Michelle Rhee announced it's time for her to move on.
The thought of not being in this role anymore is heartbreaking, to put it mildly.
Rhee says she is resigning because it's the right thing to do now.
We have agreed together that the best way to keep the reforms going is for this reformer to step aside.
Rhee is leaving after her boss, Mayor Adrian Fenty, failed to win his bid for re-election, and her policies had become a major issue in the campaign. In the wake of that defeat, it was expected she would leave.
Where does his arm go?
Rhee was challenged to overhaul the district's struggling schools, considered among the worst in the nation. She shut down 28 schools, laid off more than 450 teachers, and demanded higher performance. The result? Some improvement. Math proficiency scores have gone up from a dismal 27% to 43%. Reading proficiency from 29% to 43%. And the union agreed to a new landmark teachers contract, giving principals new hiring powers and linking teacher pay to student performance. Rhee became a national symbol for education reform.
For anyone who's out there believing that you can bring about transformational change to a dysfunctional system and have everyone be happy, it's just not possible.
Featured in the movie about America's struggling schools waiting for Superman.
You wake up every morning and you know that kids are getting a really crappy education right now.
But her style also alienated many teachers and parents.
She thought if you just fired teachers and if you made tough decisions and if you did them quickly and you shook things up, then things would be better. But they are not markedly better.
What do you consider one of your mistakes?
One of the mistakes that we made was not having a direct line of communication with teachers.
In 2 weeks, Michelle Rhee will leave the school system she bettered on many levels, but which still struggles, with less than half the students graduating on time, meaning there's a lot more work to be done. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, Washington.
One more quick program note. Michelle Rhee will appear live tomorrow morning on Today. When we come back here tonight, why one group of Americans seems destined to live longer than others, and it's still a mystery. Little weather here. Hurricane Paula has been downgraded to a Category 1 storm as it plows its way toward Cuba. It's the 16th named storm of the season. Could drop up to 10 inches of rain on parts of western Cuba tonight. And the Northeast still on the lookout for a storm developing tomorrow night that could spin into a classic nor'easter heading into the weekend. Starting at about Philly on north to New York, Providence, Boston, Portland, then Canada. Look for lots of rain, high winds for the tens of millions of people in its potential path. Even some snow from this one in the northern reaches. There's some news tonight we mentioned earlier about America's Hispanic population getting a lot of attention. Even though it's unexplained, it says that Hispanics can expect to outlive whites and blacks. Government researchers estimate that a Hispanic born in 2006 would live to be about 80 years and 7 months. A white person would live to about 78 years, a black person just under 73. The exact reason for the lifespan gap is not clear to researchers. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton took a few minutes today to see one of Kosovo's main attractions, an 11-foot-high gold likeness of her husband. The Bill Clinton statue happens to be on Bill Clinton Boulevard. As president, he supported NATO action to stop the ethnic cleansing going on there. Statue in his honor was unveiled last year. Many Kosovars see the Clinton name as key to their nation's own independence. When we come back here tonight, we begin a second night of the coverage that the world can't seem to stop watching. We said it at the top of the broadcast. It's felt at times from last night into today into tonight, like the whole country, the whole world is watching those brave men emerge from that mine in Chile, and those brave men go down and get them. For one thing, it's nice to follow a good news story, just as it's nice to be able to bring one to you. People who couldn't watch on TV wondered what number rescue are they on all day today. People who did watch couldn't stop watching, and our own Mike Taibbi was watching them.
A cheer is the same in any language, and there's been a lot of cheering. And the headlines around the world reflect the breathless reaction to the drama playing out on TV screens everywhere.
Never before has mankind ever retrieved any living person from this depth. Gosh.
In Australia, miners who themselves had once survived being trapped in the depths were moved by the rescue of these miners, though worried too.
It's all going to take the toll in the end of the day.
But mostly, from the rescue of the first miner, there's been wonder at so extraordinary an outcome. Even journalists on the scene, including our colleagues, deeply affected.
My heart was pounding. I was crying. I looked around me. Every single reporter, every single person in that crowd, grown men in tears.
Pope Benedict in Rome was moved to announce that his own prayers for the men would continue. President Obama spoke for many.
This rescue is a tribute not only to the determination of the rescue workers and the Chilean government, but also the unity and resolve of the Chilean people.
From Tokyo to Toronto, from Tel Aviv to New York, it's been an irresistible good news story. And as it is mostly Chile's story, Spanish-language networks have drawn huge audiences, and Chilean fare restaurants everywhere have been packed with patrons eager to share their joy.
It's a very, very happy moment for every Chilean in the world.
I woke up my husband. I am screaming, Viva Chile.
I think that nobody is going to forget this day.
By every means of communication, including all the social networks, the story is skipping around the world. Experts straining to explain what just months ago seemed impossible. While Chilean expats have tried to decide, are they feeling more happiness or pride at what they're seeing? Says Isadora Espinosa.
Both.
Logic said the miners would have perished. The human spirit said otherwise. Mike Taibbi, NBC News, New York.
This story, of course, will continue to unfold throughout the night tonight. We'll be carrying the coverage live on our website, nightly.msnbc.com. Don't forget MSNBC, your late local news, and tomorrow morning on Today. For us, for now, that's our broadcast for this Wednesday night. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Brian Williams. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow evening. Good night.